Everything seats? Excuse me, everyone. So, just before we kick off again, two things. A couple of people have asked the break if tweeting about it, sharing it outside the room, what's the hashtag? The hashtag is Fast Hustings. You have to be under 30 to know what that means. And the second thing is, has everyone who can put at least £1? What we might do is send the bowl around the chairs, because obviously we were volunteers. We don't want to be out of pocket, so anything you chip in would be great. Okay, so this is part 2. It's going to be general and any issues. We've had loads of questions in before, during the break. I haven't even had a chance to look at them, so it's going to be a bit random. But what we're going to try and do is the same timings, like a minute and a half candidates, but we're going to ask 3 questions this time around, so we can get through lots of questions. And again, the candidates can choose what they focus on. So that's a way of getting through lots of questions, but we also don't take up loads of time. Everyone happy? So. Okay, so the first question is from Susan Saunders. Also, show your hand, Nikki Davis and Sean Ashworth. So let's do Susan and Nikki first. Susan? Susan? Susan Saunders. Okay, all right. So one here. Where was Nikki Davis? Okay. Susan, shoot.
As all of the candidates seem to agree with each other, apart from Tim, particularly about grammar schools, who do the panellists suggest we vote for in Shoreham and East Worthing to ensure grammar schools are not being introduced?
Good question.
Thank you. And Nikki Davis.
So just following on from that, my question is, I'm listening to all the candidates, and 3 of you, Lib, Dem, Labour and Green Party, I think you're all great. So I'm just asking, is there no plans, or why are there no plans for a progressive alliance?
Sean, there you go.
Mine's an environmental question. I ask this from the context of having worked in the public sector, environmental sector for about 17 years now. And it's about our district specifically. Shoreham and Worthing are parts of the country that are subject to flood risk, on the cutting edge of flood risk, if you like, in England. We are a water-stressed area, so droughts are frequent and expected to become more frequent. And additional development in the region and our area is significant. And my question to the panel is, how will you specifically pursue environmental investment in our area? And I say that not from, I don't want you to think I'm some sort of extremist environmentalist, who I firmly believe that every decision that government, local government and national government should make should balance environment, community and economics. So I'll just repeat my question. How will you pursue investment in the environment?
Great, thank you. So, yes, what about environmental investment, what about progressive alliance, and what about how do we stop grammars involved and how we agree that grammar should be introduced? That was the question. Sophie.
Hello? Yep.
The environment. We've only got one planet. We need to start looking after it. And the important thing is that the Labour Party will ensure that all of the current environmental protections that are there under the EU would remain after Brexit. We'd make sure that we meet the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement, and we'd invest in sustainable energy. We live on the coast here. We need to start putting more money into things like tidal lagoons. We need to decrease the reliance upon fossil fuels, and we will ban fracking, because that's just further reliance on fossil fuels. And it's all about building a clean economy that is going to make the country and the environment safe for our children. Locally, we need to make sure we've got an integrated public transport system that takes people off the roads, so we're not adding to air pollution. And as part of that, we'd be looking at a new Brighton Main Line, renationalising Southern Rail. And of course, ensuring that we've got proper bus services to all the outlying communities that are actually isolated and forgotten and cut off. Because we don't want more people getting onto the A27 and adding to that pollution, especially if they're proposing to build a property development on a floodplain and putting a primary school with a playing field right next to the A27. Not where I want my kids playing. Thank you.
Okay, let me take Progressive Alliance first. So I have spent a year trying to get a Progressive Alliance locally. The Green Party nationally have invested a tremendous amount of energy on the Progressive Alliance. It was Natalie Bennett, she was leader, who sent a letter to all the party leaders saying we need a Progressive Alliance. So I am totally with you. I do not understand why we're all here. I've asked different people, including our independents, do you agree with our policies? I've heard some yeses. So I would really like that question to be put back, and I want to hear the answer from everybody else on that one. So I've done my best, and I will continue to do my best on that one, because I think we need it, and that's part of our new approach to politics. Who would you vote for grammar schools? Tough question, isn't it? And this is a question on the streets that is coming to me time and time again, or email, who do I vote for? Who should I vote for? I want to vote tactically. What does that mean? And it's stressing people, and it's leading to the situation where a lot of people are just opting out. So my answer is vote with your values. I'm someone who spent my life voting tactically. It's led to bipartisan politics. It's led to decisions I've not been happy with, and I think 4 years ago I said enough is enough. I'm going to now go with my values. So if your values resonate with another member of the panel, vote for them. If your values resonate for Greens, vote for us. If your values resonate with getting rid of old politics, coming in with new politics, a fundamental rehaul of the system rather than tinkering around the edges, if you believe in proportional representation, if you believe that those billions that are going into Trident and to other pet projects with better expensive health and education, then vote Green. And that would also be a vote in the grammar schools. Am I out of time?
Sorry.
Someone has to get another question in on the environment, or read out my...
Will be another question.
So on the Progressive Alliance question, so I'm someone who's actually been quite involved on this conversation around the country actually, and I very much support the notion of coming together around shared values. I think you'll probably know that the Liberal Democrats are standing down for Karen Lucas in Brighton Pavilion, and we're very pleased that the Greens have chosen to stand down in Lewis to support the Lib Dems. And so there is already some of that happening. I think another good example is the candidate from the NHS who's standing against Jeremy Hunt, where both Greens and Lib Dems are standing aside. And I think there is a movement towards trying to find those key characters who can challenge the establishment. And I think it needs to be part of a much broader process of change that I think we both talked about in terms of the shared policies around social policy, around the green agenda, and around electoral reform. We absolutely agree electoral reform is a key part of that. In this constituency, I would argue that we are the best place to help you to do that. I think you'll find that, given that we're the second major party in the county council, we have had control of this district council in the past. I think we're very well placed to help you do that, but we're also very happy to continue talks with others. Briefly, on the environment, what I would say is that in power, the Lib Dems did deliver on this. The Green Deal, which you see that led to the renewable heating incentive and the feed-in tariffs, was a Lib Dem policy, and we would like to see that continue and actually to go towards 60% of energy from renewables by 2030, which actually goes beyond the Paris Climate Agreement aims. Thank you.
Grammar schools sorted out amongst yourselves. Progressive Alliance, let's be honest, let's call it what it really is. It's an anti-conservative alliance. Very good, we got that straight. So what we've been saying earlier about getting more young people involved in politics and getting involved in their communities, I want them to do that for positive reasons. The only reason for having what you call a progressive alliance is to vote negatively to stop somebody forming the government. Now, that's why at the beginning I welcome the fact we have got all the candidates here. I welcome the fact we've got a UKIP candidate, even though he's not here, because I think he'll get a complete bumping at the polls, and they deserve to get a complete bumping. But there is a full choice for everybody in this constituency as to how they vote, and if they want to vote tactically, they are perfectly capable of voting tactically without being denied the choice because there's been a stitch-up between the parties to take that person off the ballot paper, and that's honestly what it amounts to. More important stuff on the environment. One thing I'm really proud of in my years here is setting up the I Project, Eco, Young and Engage. We now have 250 kids coming on to the 10th Eco Summit we're holding next month in Worthing, and we have taught those kids, and they have taught us and shared how we can do so much more for the environment, and it's them that's going to inherit the consequences. Absolutely, as Sophie said, I'm really keen that after Brexit we inherit some of those, or all of those, environmental best practices from the EU. But actually, a lot of them were led by us, not least the Climate Change Act, which is much more demanding than even the EU requires, and we supported that, and we need to do much more like that.
Andy.
I've taken the order. Here we go. Who to vote for on grammars? Anyone who doesn't oppose. If that's me, great. If it's someone else, great. Just don't oppose. Very simple. Progressive Alliance. Now, the whole reason I'm standing as an independent, and I've had a bit of grief, you're splitting the vote, etc., etc., but I've tried voting tactically, and it hasn't worked. And so I'm trying to make a difference myself. Now, if people want to have a go at me for that, fine. But that's why I'm standing, because the Progressive Alliance and the tactical voting hasn't worked for me in the past. Okay, you can dig me out as much as you like, I don't really mind. That's your choice. As far as the environment goes, yeah, there's lots of good work going on. Keep it going. Don't tear up any of these agreements. The Brexit stuff, don't let that affect it. There's been some great work, as Tim actually rightly said, the planet's for our children. And if we screw it up now, then actually we're harming our own children, and nobody wants to do that.
Okay. It always struck me like as this in 2015, and it strikes me like this now. It's a strange room when you have a Hustings where every single person knows who's going to win the election locally. That's the situation here. Tim said he opened up by saying he's been an MP here for 20 years. He'll be an MP here for another 20, 30, 40, how long he wants to. And actually, we need to do better than that. Whether or not you agree with Tim's policies, we need to do better. He needs to be held to account in a meaningful way. And a progressive alliance, as long as we have first past the post, is the only way to do it. Now, the problem is, and from my own perspective, as somebody who's worked very hard to form a progressive alliance with Louise Irvine and Jeremy Hunt's seats, Surrey South West, the problem is that mostly two of the big parties put their party before their community. Their community's issues are not as important as their parties. You know, the Labour Party and the Lib Dems generally, that is the most important thing. And I think that people need to accept that politics has changed. And these progressive alliances have to happen, because if they don't happen, we're going to end up with 20 years with the same MP, and I just don't think it's good for our constituency, to be absolutely honest with you. In terms of who you should vote for, I'd look at the candidates and I think, who is going to fight the hardest for the things that are the most important to me? And if that's me, great. If it's Andy, if it's Tim, if it's Sophie, choose whoever you think is going to fight the hardest for you.
Thank you. Okay, so 3 more. Now we're going to really throw the cat amongst the pigeons. So we've got Drew Tinsley. I'm going to put your hand up. Drew Tinsley, Drew, and Neville Presley, and just someone's put Louise. Louise? Okay, let's do Neville and Drew first. So, Drew?
I'm a community worker in a neighbouring town, and people come to me looking food for a food bank. One of the things I try and help them with is to make sure that rather than just give them crumbs, if there's extra money available, that they take the opportunity. The government at the moment, there's so huge amounts of businesses and individuals who are not paying their taxes, either because they're evading it or avoiding it. And I'd like to ask the panelists what their party would do to ensure that we claim all that we should be, that is entitled to the country.
Thank you. All right. Neville, I will recap the questions. I didn't hear it, but let's go from Neville.
The Mayor said that no deal is better than a bad deal. What sort of divorce payments in Europe would constitute a good deal?
Louise, I think it was Louise who was talking about debt. Where's Louise? Is she still here? I'll tell you what, I'll ask that question for her. So, current interest payments of national debt is 50 billion. The majority of the policy proposals discussed this evening sound wonderful, but what would it cost to future generations? Okay, so something about debt, something about what constitutes a good deal for Brexit, and also what we do to avoid businesses and individuals paying tax. There's a few whoppers in there. So we're starting off with Leslie.
Okay, so starting with Brexit, I mean, quite frankly, Theresa May's trying to sell us a deal that Del Boy would be completely proud of. I think none of us would ever sign a mobile phone contract, sign a contract for a new item of clothing, for anything without knowing what the terms and conditions were. That's sort of the basic thing on a deal. At the moment, we have no idea what the deal is. So I think the thing that we would be pushing for would be a referendum on the deal and on the terms and conditions of Brexit, so that we actually get a say ourselves. So that's the first one. The second one was around tax. Big one. So for us, obviously, it's really important that everyone pays their fair share and that there has to be a crackdown on tax dodging. I think everybody would probably say that. So what we specifically would do would reform taxation to include a wealth tax on the top 1% of earners. They can afford it. We would introduce something called the Robin Hood tax. It's an idea that's been going around for decades, which would be a tax on high-value transactions in the finance sector and on inheritance tax according to the wealth of the recipient. We would be supporting and promoting small businesses, cooperatives and mutuals, so making sure that they're not getting disproportionately taxed. And we'd be supporting startups, creative enterprises through community credit and green investment to give opportunities for young people to be creative and innovative. And I don't know what the third one was. I didn't have time to write quick enough.
The third one was about business avoiding tax and debt and national debt and good deal of Brexit.
Well, again, I think I just go back to the fact we're the 5th richest country in the world. We underpay our public service staff compared to other countries in Europe. We have the money, we're just making choices about how it's spent. So again, what I was saying earlier about where we choose to put our money, do we choose to put it into nuclear weapons that we're probably and hopefully never ever going to use, or do we choose to put that into our health and education? Do we choose to subsidise?
So the third question was about the current interest, 50 billion on our debt. These ideas all sound good. How are you going to pay for it?
Okay, I think I'll take the debt one together with the tax one because they kind of go together. And we, as the Lib Dems, do have a fully costed budget, which I've already described a little bit earlier. We think it is realistic within the means that our country has to be able to pay for the services that I've described in terms of health and schools. Some of the ways we do that, we've reversed the cuts to corporation tax that the Conservatives have brought in. We would reverse the capital gains tax cuts. And we would raise the inheritance. We would oppose the raising of the inheritance tax threshold, which also took more capital out of tax. So what we've seen from the Conservatives over the last few years is the wealthiest are paying less tax, while the rest of us are being told to pick up the bill. So we would reverse those, and we believe it's possible within the budget that exists. We'd also take tough action against tax evasion, introducing a new general anti-avoidance rule. And we review business rates to lessen the burden for smaller businesses so that they are given a fair chance to survive and thrive on the high street. Just briefly on the EU, this is obviously a massive question for us. We are the main party that has been campaigning against Brexit throughout. We think there is a good deal which is called being in the EU, and we would like to see a continued close cooperation with the European Union. It's our biggest single market. The idea of leaving the single market and reverting to WTO rules is an incredible, disastrous outcome for this country, and we wouldn't like to see that.
Let's get to the debt question, because we've had an awful lot of promises about very eye-watering amounts of money this evening. And there are only two ways you raise that. Either you raise tax and hope that people are still in the country to pay that, or you cut spending. Now, on the question of tax avoidance, absolutely there's more we can do, but actually, clamping down on tax avoidance and evasion has raised more than 5 billion in the last few years already, and there's a lot more that can be done. We have now got some of these consistent avoiders, the Amazons, the Googles, the Starbucks, are actually now starting to pay what they should be paying in this country. There should be a simple principle that if you make money from customers in the UK, you should be taxed on the profits on what those customers pay in this country. And that's a principle we need absolutely to adhere to. But even within the EU at the moment, there's tax avoidance going on in other countries despite what the EU is supposed to be doing on this. We've got to be realistic, though. We have brought down the deficit by 2/3 so far. We are still not balancing the books. We still have a huge debt that we have got to service. And just coming up with lots and lots of spending pledges without knowing how you're going to pay for them does not do our children and grandchildren any favours at all. When in France, under the last socialist government, they jacked tax up to 75%. Surprise, surprise, the richest people in that country left. That's why London became the 6th largest French city in the world. As it is, the top 1% pay 27% of all income tax at the moment. That's the biggest proportion ever. It may be more if you take it the sort of levels to pay for all the promises you've had tonight. Those people leave the country.
32 manufacture.
Andy.
It depends which newspaper you read as to whether the debt's going up or down. Okay. You just tell it, well, maybe I wasn't listening. Right, depends. Okay, again, depends on the newspaper you read, I think.
What's the difference
Tim, just let Andy have his time, please.
Thank you. So I think as far as the food bank question goes, that to a certain extent there'll always be food banks, but the use of them increasing is not ideal. Obviously, it's going up. People like the Worthing Churches Homeless Project is doing fantastic work in the constituency and needs supporting and need applauding for that. But again, it'd be ideal if we didn't have them at all. Now, they're targeting stuff like benefits, school funding, they're targeting the NHS to grab back some money. Actually, they could probably, they're sort of easy wins, aren't they? Because they're just not giving out. Why don't they chase, I know you say Google is starting to pay, you're saying Amazon's starting to pay. Are they paying enough? Well, it's not that much on how much they're getting in, as far as I'm aware. I can't remember the exact figures, but you know, it's more, but it's still not enough. And actually, I'd rather they got more from Google than took a bit from Jules's school budget. Actually, Brexit.
It's time. Sorry. Sorry. I'll let you 15 more seconds because you. Okay. Carl.
Okay. With regards to the problem is, there's kind of narratives come to be believed in terms of the fact that where's the money going to come from? We are currently the second most unequal in terms of income inequality in the whole of Europe, folks. Other countries are managing progressive tax systems quite easily, and their rich are not fleeing. That's a complete myth. It doesn't happen. We do need more progressive taxation, whether it's a Tobin tax, or whether it's a land value tax, or whether it's 50p in the pound. We need something that's more progressive, because at the moment, inequality, income inequality, is at record levels, and it doesn't need to be. These things can be paid for. That's the first thing. In terms of Brexit, everyone looked at this. It really interests me watching the Brexit debate. We can't have another referendum on Brexit, not because there's a problem with regards to democracy, but because we proved in June last year that we actually, as a country, are not capable of doing a referendum properly. What you had was a very complex, nuanced subject, which was caricatured by both sides, misinformation spread by both sides, and ultimately the people who won were the ones with most money and the most media control. With Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the European Commission, and Theresa May can't even have a lunch without it being an international incident. It's very clear to us that none of us know right now what's going to happen in 2 years' time. We don't need another referendum because we can't do them, so what we need is, it needs to go back to Parliament, and we need to lobby our MPs like crazy. People like Tim, we need to send them back to Parliament to make sure that when he votes on the final deal, it represents us.
Yours is working now. We're the 5th richest economy in the world, and it's absolutely disgraceful that there's 1 million people using food banks. That is totally unacceptable, and we would fight the causes of poverty. One of the big things is we need to clamp down on tax avoidance. We've got the global companies that aren't paying, whereas I've run my own business for 20 years. I had to pay all my taxes. I didn't get to jump out of it. This thing about debt and deficit, I mean, the thing is, austerity, George Osborne's austerity experiments failed, isn't it? Yeah. He said that he'd bring debt down, and actually it's doubled in 7 years. And this thing about fully costed ideas, and where's the money going to come from? Well, we suggested to the other parties that all of the manifestos were independently audited to make sure they could be paid for. The Tories decided not to do that. Ours is fully costed and was audited. And one of the things is that we need to make sure that we owe less at the end of the Parliament than we do at the start, which is why we're going to bring in a fiscal credibility rule, which means that we're not borrowing for day-to-day spending. I mean, borrowing for day-to-day spending is like going and taking out a payday loan to buy your lunch. And that's what the government's been doing, and that's not the way you should be running an economy.
I think there's a new round of questions. So some more interesting ones here. So Laura Raymond. Laura, put your hand up.
She's gone.
She's gone, okay. I'll ask a question because it's an interesting one. What can your party offer as far as counter-terrorism prevent strategy? It's clearly not hardline enough, is the question. Obviously, this week. Sarah Fenton. Sarah Fenton, okay, I could get a mic there, and also Kim Murphy. There's Kim. Okay, so there's Sarah and Kim over there. So, yes, one on counter-terrorism, and
Hello everybody, thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. I'm here because of what I believe is important for Shoreham. I understand you're talking about the wider issues of the national election, but for me what I need to hear about is your views on Shoreham and the building and the development that's happening in Shoreham. I personally believe there is too much building occurring on our green spaces in Shoreham, and I want to know what you, as individuals and representing your parties, are going to do to stop or reduce it. And if you can't stop or reduce it, are you going to provide enough spaces for our children to go to school?
Kim?
Hi, I was just wondering what you got on top something. Do you think it should be brought back? Or put back into the dark ages where it belongs?
So, just the question is, what something should be brought back or not? Might get a yes, no, maybe. Yes, counter-terrorism, what we're doing to reduce building development in Shoreham, and fox hunting. And we're starting this time with Ollie.
Okay, so on the counter-terrorism question, clearly we live in very challenging times. For us as the Liberal Democrats, we believe that it's essential that we build trust across communities. We believe there needs to be more investing in community policing to actually build up that trust so that people understand who they can go to, so that they can share any concerns they might have within their communities. But we also think that it's a broader question around how we as a society provide opportunities for younger people, particularly younger people from different ethnic backgrounds, so that they do feel a place and that they feel welcomed. And I have to say that it's been pretty shocking since the Brexit referendum, the level of hate crime and the kind of language of xenophobia that we hear in our society now. And I think this is unfortunately part of what drives that radicalisation. And we would certainly like to see much more effort in terms of community engagement and cohesion. Fox hunting, we're absolutely opposed. On Shoreham and green spaces, I've heard a lot of people talk about the difficulties that we're stuck between the sea on one side, the downs on the other. Clearly there are targets to increase housing around the country. Our view is that there are brownfield sites within the constituency that could be used, for example, along the Shoreham harbour site and along the side of the harbour, other areas that are not currently being fully used, former council-owned areas that could be turned over to housing. That does mean slightly higher density housing, but not high-rise, perhaps two levels, so that you can actually maximise the space, also make sure that they're green and energy-efficient homes that are built.
All those subjects are probably worth a public meeting in their own right. And I've done a number of meetings on the overdevelopment, and that's a really crucial issue for the area. I think we will be doing some more meetings on that, not least around the Newmans Farm development, which I've got some very serious reservations about IKEA, bit of it, and attracting in 2 million extra customers on an already congested A27. On the terrorism, Laura's question, I've been sitting on the Home Affairs Select Committee. We did a whole study into radicalisation, and this is the really big topic at the moment. We had relations of girls who went off. There were some 3 girls from East London, 15, 16-year-old girls, who disappeared through Turkey and went to join the ISIL in Syria. We had their parents and sisters in front of us, trying to comprehend why ordinary girls who were at school.
You're changing microphone.
Why a 15 or 16-year-old girl who was doing well at school, her sister said she was just like any normal girl. We used to sit down and watch At Home with the Kardashians. That was the totem of how normal a teenager is apparently in this country. We have a sister of Jihadi John in front of us, again trying to explain what is it about somebody who's born in this country, brought up in this country, educated, doing well at school, gone to university, got a job, all of a sudden then does the sort of thing that we've seen happen in Manchester this week or elsewhere. And we have got to understand that question and get to the bottom of that. And we all have a duty in that. And particularly, we need to have a strategy, and the prevent strategy needs to be improved, but it's one that actually engages with the Muslim community in this country as well, that they feel part of the solution. This is a really, really difficult problem, and we did a whole meeting on just that.
Andy. Well, if we start, we'll be like, I do want to open it up at the end, but unless anyone's got any objections?
Yes.
Okay, yes or no on Fox Hunting?
You know how I voted? I voted for the middle way option last time. I had no interest in...
So yes or no?
I have no interest in hunting, never been hunting. I voted for the middle way option, which would be to regulate it rather than to ban
Andy. We've only got 15 minutes left, so I'm sorry to press on. But Andy.
Fox hunting, no. Simple. Counter-terrorism, actually, I think our police do a fantastic job currently, actually. Cuts to them doesn't help. They rely heavily on intelligence from the general public, and they need the staff to deal with that intelligence and to act upon that intelligence. So I think you could probably point a bit of a finger at the government for cutting funding to the police, but they're doing as good a job as they can, I think. And the thing in Manchester, awful. I didn't realise quite how affected I'd be by it. But that's kids, and that's what actually really upset me. And, this sounds awful. Brings a bit of a tear to my eye now, and certainly did in the minute silence at 11 o'clock today. I'll be at school. So the Shoreham building, it's a tough one. I got a question from a constituent this week or this weekend that said my private rent is getting really, really high. The reason their private rent is really, really high is because there's no other flats, houses to live in, and so the landlord can afford, because they know they're going to be able to put someone in that property. And so therefore we do need some, but green space is exceptionally important. My childhood was full of building dens, and we can't deny our children the building dens thing that I had as well. Red hand game, brilliant. It's a flag and everything.
Thank you.
I honestly didn't know that there was a middle way in fox hunting. I thought, seriously, I assumed maybe half of a fox was torn to pieces by dogs, but not the other. Folks, it's 2017. 8 out of 10 people in this country are against fox hunting. 7 out of 10 Conservative voters are against fox hunting. Who are these people appealing to? I honestly don't understand it. Well, it shouldn't be happening. It's absolutely uncivilized. It's cruel and barbaric, and it's wrong. There is no middle way. It just needs to be stopped. With regards to counter-terrorism, this is obviously an extremely complex area. There's a lot of research that's gone into trying to understand why it is when you have these very often disaffected, disillusioned and directionless young men, why they get seduced and attracted to what these, and this is what they are, they're very hyper-masculine, thrilling cultures of radicalisation. That's how they're experienced, and that's how they're pitched towards these people who often feel very lost. You've got that issue, which is really complex and it needs very sensitive work. You've also got the issue, and the former ambassador to Libya was saying this on the television today, that we also have to think about our place and the aftermath of the military conflicts that we've engaged in. It's particularly Libya and Iraq. And people voted, whether you agree with that or not, people voted for or against it for very good reasons. But the aftermath of both there's been a huge fallout. And so any commission that's put into this needs to really see the complexity of it, rather than just scapegoating and targeting.
I spent 7 years in Saudi Arabia, and I worked alongside a Saudi Air Force sergeant who on his holidays from Saudi Air Force would go to Afghanistan to fight. He's probably currently doing the same thing in Yemen, because that's where a lot of the Saudi military are going to fight for a hobby, more or less. We need to start having an ethical foreign policy. We need to fight the reasons people become radicalised. We need to start engaging with countries in a diplomatic way rather than bombs first. We need to work with communities to make sure that people don't become disenfranchised and marginalised and then vulnerable to radicalisation. And we need to stop selling arms to those countries. Here at home, we need a properly funded police force that can actually go out and do the things they're supposed to do. Soldiers are not trained to patrol the streets of the United Kingdom. We had that before in Northern Ireland, and we don't want it on the mainland now. The money needs to go into the police force so that they can go and do the job that they are trained for. Fox hunting? I think there's a problem with the fox hunting ban personally. It's not tight enough. It needs tightening up so that these people get convicted and sent to prison. Absolutely disgusting behaviour. If any of us took our kids to that, we would be in front of the child services.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. The Green Party fundamentally opposed to all blood sports, so not just for fox hunting is the one that's being raised at the moment, but we're fundamentally opposed to all blood sports. And in fact, we oppose the killing and infliction of pain or suffering upon all animals in the name of sport or leisure. In terms of counter-terrorism strategy, Carl, Sophie, Bravo, agree with everything you've both just said. I think part of this also goes to the bigger picture of the sort of othering that happens between us and them, both locally but also globally. So it's about, I've spent 20 years working in international humanitarian aid relief and international development, and seeing the othering that we're so good at doing as human beings, it's quite interesting, and that we're doing it here every day, and we hear about it, we look at it every time we open the newspaper. So for me, it's about really trying to stop that othering, think about who we are together on this one planet that we all have, and we all want us in the best interest of our children and our families. I think what we would be trying to push for is a caring, I know that's a word that we don't really like anymore, do we? It sounds so soft and it's so green and it's so wet. But actually, I think that's something that I'd be very proud to be, is actually to being a caring, confident Britain that uses its influence wisely, that we use it to build peace, that we use it to protect the environment, and that we use it to offer sanctuary to people at risk. So that's in addition to the points around why people get radicalised and the other points about the police. Local housing, yeah, absolutely big one. So I will get to the environmental bit about that before I run out of time. So we would repeal it. Is it really? Yeah. No. Oh, is it? We'd repeal the national policy, a planning policy framework. That would be a start. And also, we think there's no point trying to talk about building houses and housing until we've got a sustainable infrastructure that would accompany it.
Right, we've literally got 10 minutes left, right? So, another round of questions, or I'm happy to open up to the floor. A quick show of hands. The questions that people submitted, you can put your hand up, or I'll open up to the floor. Vote for, if you want to vote for the questions that have already been submitted, put your hands up, just like, as in someone's taking time to write them, or anyone want that, or do you want to open it up to the floor? Put your hands up now. Okay. Alright, let's do it. So, who wants to, let's go freestyle. Who wants to say something? Yes. Okay, go for it. Yeah, we'll still take several, so we'll do three, so quick as you can, please.
Hello, good evening everybody. My name is Heather Duffy and I do try very, very hard to get house support in Ada. Well, not only in Ada, but all over the district. My problem is, as an audience, you would seem to be showing very little concern with the problems our NHS are having. and hence difficulties for patients. Services will need sorting out unless more money, more funding is available, who will pay?
You have actually asked one already. If anyone else hasn't asked one, the lady behind in black. Sorry.
It's another NHS-related question. I work as a clinical psychologist locally in the NHS. It was mentioned earlier about the increase in the number of mental health nurses, which is something that the government has pledged. However, given that a third of the nursing workforce is over the age of 50, and the government plans to scrap bursaries for nurse training, I'd like to know how people imagine those nurses are going to recruit from. Where are they going to come from?
Anyone else, or should we get stuck in? How's it going down front here?
Can you explain that word? Just stand up there. Can you explain?
Can you explain why, after World War II, when debt to GDP ratio was upwards of 200%, why the government then reintroduced the NHS, the social care system, but now, when we've got a debt to GDP ratio far, far lower, we can't afford the NHS anymore. In fact, we can't afford most things.
Right, is this one working? Yeah, okay. NHS, Heather, for those of you who know her, has waged a long-standing campaign to get more community beds, certainly in ADA, because we just don't have them. And we are told by the clinicians that they don't think that is the best way of using that resource. So this, I've queried that, I question that, because we've still got too many people locally who are stuck. Okay? Yeah. Right. Because we still have too many people locally who are staying longer in hospital than they need to because of the lack of appropriate care for them to go back home, residential homes or whatever. And that is one of the biggest inefficiencies in the NHS at the moment. We've got a much better joining up of those services. But we are very lucky locally, and Heather, you and I and many others probably in this hall, when we marched back in 2008, in that Worthing Hospital is an outstanding hospital. Despite all the challenges that it has, it's one of 5 outstanding acute hospitals in the whole of this country, doing a really good job in challenging circumstances, and I think we should be grateful for that.
Why? I think grateful, you should be expecting it.
There's no denying that the hospitals in the constituency are doing a fantastic job, and no one's going to argue with that, but with funds being constantly cut, and staff, well, they are being cut, so okay, they're not being cut, how can they maintain the service they're currently doing? They can't, can they? Social care, my grandmother is one of those people who's been stuck in hospital, not in this constituency to be fair, because of a lack of social care, so I sort of have some empathy with that as well. The NHS and employing people is like teaching. No one wants to do it anymore. Okay, it's not paid enough. There's too much stress. The conditions are terrible. Okay, so good luck. All right, employing all those 10,000 mental health nurses, etc., etc., etc. I don't know where you're going. We haven't even got people coming in from outside anymore. They're not allowed. So I don't know where you're magicking these people up from.
Okay, thanks. I'll try and be brief about the NHS. First question I'll answer is the one about mental health. What really bothers me most about elections is the way that mental health is used as a badge, a card. Nick Clegg did it in 2015 and Theresa May's doing it now. None of them did anything at all to help the mental health services, but now they've become these big champions of mental health. Me and a group of colleagues started a national organisation called Psychologists Against Austerity, and it was with that issue in mind, because we don't have enough people to help the people who are really suffering and really struggling. That's the first point. The second point, with regards to the NHS, 2012, the Health and Social Care Act mandated its privatisation. The reason that this is happening, and the reason why your question isn't really being properly addressed, is because the Tories don't want the NHS. They've never liked the NHS. There are a few of them who support it, make no mistake, but this Conservative government are selling it off, they're privatising it, they're cutting it to pieces.
You shake your head, they are definitely...
And what's happening is patients are suffering. 30% of children's inpatient hospitals have closed temporarily this year because they don't have staff to run them. That is scandalous, folks. And it's not the end of it, because we've got these new things called sustainability and transformation plans, where in our area we're going to have £500 million of more of cuts, including 112 million to adult social care. If you think it's bad now, it's going to get even worse. If I was Tim here, in this panel talking about the NHS, I would be absolutely ashamed.
Can respond to that in 1 minute.
Honestly, we've got to pack up as caretakers, all that sort of stuff, so I'm going to keep on with it. I'm sure you take some afterwards. Sophie.
The NHS is in a dire situation. The health service is in crisis. We've got lack of funding, we've got lack of staff. The Labour Party would commit over £30 billion to that through extra funding, and that would be raised through an increase in income tax for the top 5% and through increasing tax on private medical insurance. We'd halt the sustainability and transformation plans and reverse the privatisation, and we'd make sure that the NHS was the preferred provider for anything that's going on in the NHS. I mean, it's ludicrous that NHS management are actually using time to bid for NHS contracts. That's an absolutely crazy situation. The staff, we get rid of the NHS pay cap, and we make sure there was safe staffing levels for all of the patients. We need to make sure we've got the best trained staff in the world working within our NHS. And to do that, we reintroduce bursaries and funding for health-related degrees, and we also need to protect the rights of those EU staff that are already working there. Staff, we would have no NHS. We need proper funding, and we need to look after the people that are working.
First, thank you, Heather, for raising that. I really hope somebody was going to, so I really appreciate it. The NHS is not in crisis because of overspending, bad management, too many immigrants. It's in crisis because of the systematic, cynical underfunding by a government whose minister is committed to selling it off. Due respect to other panel members here, who I have a lot of respect for, Labour did lay the foundations for privatisation. The Lib Dems did help push through the Hated Health and Social Care Act, and the Tories are now trying to put another nail in the NHS coffin. So where we would be is reversing privatisation, putting a funding injection immediately and straight back in, and saying very clearly and very loudly, the NHS is not for sale. Mental health is a very strong personal and Green Party priority, not just because it's election time, but because 1 in 4 of the people that we meet every single day is suffering from mental health. Now, I work in refugee camps. I work with some of the most traumatised people in the world. And I talk to them about their lives, I ask them questions, and I say, have you got questions for me? And they say, young people in your country, they must be so happy. And I think, do I tell them the truth? Do I tell them about anorexia? Do I tell them about bulimia? Do I tell them about self-harm? Do I tell them about youth suicide? And I do. And they cannot believe that it is true. And I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we, as you will imagine, the Lib Dems are absolutely committed to the NHS. I mean, I think it's interesting to know that Beveridge was originally a Liberal, and this is something that we are fully committed to. We do have a fully funded way to maintain it, and I agree with you that we are, in a way, in a similar kind of moment as the post-war settlement. We need a new settlement for health and social care in this country. We would start by putting a penny in the pound on income tax. That raises an extra 6 billion, and 2 billion of that would be for social care, 1 billion for mental health. Over the longer term, we would do a review of health and care funding as part of a health and social care convention, and we break down the artificial boundaries between health and social care to ensure for a more integrated, holistic approach that actually cares for people throughout their lives. We'd also move towards a presumption of home, not hospital, try to make sure that we can support people in their homes. And different to the Conservatives, we wouldn't make people sell their homes to get that support. We would make sure that there is that support provided through a fully costed model. We also believe that mental health is a crucial issue. We want to match the support and reduce waiting times for mental health to the same as for physical health. And we are looking at particularly vulnerable groups, for example, new mothers with postnatal depression, other key vulnerable groups that need that additional support. We look at a public health campaign to promote steps that people can take to improve their own mental health resilience, a bit like the sort of 5-a-day public health campaign, to actually raise awareness, break out of stigmas so people can talk about these things openly. Finally, we would also reinstate the student nurse bursaries, and we would introduce a patient premium. So there's a whole package of areas. I believe it's perfectly doable, so we're ready to do it for you.
I'm afraid our time is up. Thank you. You've been brilliant. I think I've been really impressed by all the variety of questions, type of questions. Thank you for supporting it. It's been quite a lot of work gone into it, and I'm really glad that people got involved and got engaged. Don't forget, stick a pound in if you haven't, when you leave, just cover the costs. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the candidates for
I'm a carer.
Today, I was wondering if I she had attacked 3 nurses and kids in St Mary's. But at the end of the day, I wasn't going to section. I was determined on that. So these are people, I got the service manager on, this is what we're out about. I'm still very good.
My friends had literally, at that time, and I know it's quite true, at that time there was literally no bed she could find. She ended up finding...
I can name you in 5 all the other rooms that actually exist. There's a few more things like this shop. Most of them are in the private sector. Why not use this in special places? So in Birmingham, we're trying to bring them in as a kind of product. Most of our most expensive. There you are.